of the Fall 1997 Kenney Ridge Retreat. We're sitting here at Kenney Ridge in a beautiful, beautiful October morning. We've had a lot of fun so far with some problem-solving activities and a really delicious breakfast. And now to open the proceedings, it's going to be Nancy Stangle, who's going to tell us about ALT, the Athens Land.
I'm sorry Skipper's not here to help me talk about this, because I wanted to talk about the history of it, how it got started, and so I want to talk about that, but also I want the board members to interject anything at any time during my talk, so please do. The formation of ALT, which used to be called WALT, West Athens Land Trust, to me is very much connected with Kenney Ridge. So I need to talk a little bit about the background of Kenney Ridge, which came first. And as some of you have heard this before, so bear with me, but I guess it was in September of '93 where we put a contract on this particular piece of land contingent on financing and getting a plan approved. We had been Phil and I had been part of a group for several years. Kate and Dan were part of this group, talking about the desire for a community. We were using co-housing as a model. And we did a lot of talking about what our ideal community would be like. So, in September, we put a contract on this land, as I said, and immediately started to try to get a group together to make this happen. So we had meetings, and we contacted the people we thought might be interested. Kate and Dan were in Malaysia. They had just left, so they weren't here for that. And one of the things that we talked about, I mean, basically the question was, how can we do this? How can we finance this piece of land, which was the price, which had come down to $300,000. One of the things that we talked about was the idea of land trust, because that was an idea we had talked about. Now, land trust means that the land is held by the trust, and people can put houses on it if that's how it's set up, but it's a much more communal kind of situation with the ownership of the land. Most land trusts have the land donated to them, or at least most of the ones that I know of. And so we sat around, I remember in my living room, talking about how to make this happen, and wishing that we had some person that could buy this land and donate it to a land trust. But since we didn't, we started looking at other options. During this fall, this was fall of '93, I was introduced to Skipper, and so she also became part of this group. And we met with the two basic goals that our initial group had were to form a community and to preserve the land as much as possible, to keep as much in open space and impact it as little as possible. So we met with the two other land trusts in the area, the Kenney River Land Trust and the Broad River. I think we met with the Broad River people first. And they were very supportive of us, but we were outside of the Broad River watershed, and they felt like we didn't fit their criteria. We also met with the Kenney River Land Trust, and they were interested in the 17-acre tract, which has the two springs that run into the Kenney River. But they were not interested in holding a conservation easement on any land that was in the middle of a community. So that was somewhat discouraging to us, but we felt like the group that we had would be able to preserve the land some way or another. Also during this time, well, we also asked Mr. Kenney if he would be willing to donate or put some of it in conservation easement, meaning we wouldn't have to buy as much. But he needed to go ahead and sell it so he could settle with his siblings and their heirs, and so that wasn't a possibility. So also during this time, Skipper and I ended up with the day-to-day responsibilities of this after a meeting that we had. I remember when it was because it was freezing cold and we had been meeting out here to talk, and so because it was so cold we met in the corn crib. And
it was warmer in there.
It was a little bit warmer in there. And one of the people that had been part of this group that had met for several years said to us, or the general feeling was represented by this person who said, you know, why have meetings to make all these decisions about, you know, how we're going to do this and this? Because we had done this for a long time. And so basically she said, just do it. You know, you do it and we'll be there. And so I left that meeting feeling like we don't have a group, it's not going to happen, just totally discouraged. But after that meeting I did talk to Skipper, and she was sort of there with me, and so we tried to take it on. We were still in the period where we had a contract contingent on the financing and the plan. And so we were still trying to see if we could pull it off. Also during this time, one of our goals was to make it possible for anybody that wanted to be a part of it, no matter what their financial situation was. I sent out letters to people, you know, if you're interested, let us know. We're trying to do this as a group. If you want to look at bartering, or you know, we're trying to do this together. And so that was always one of our major goals, was to have it be possible for anybody who wanted to. So we tried to meet with people individually and hear what their situations were. We were also meeting with people that did developments to find out what the cost would be, because we had no idea. We had no lot lines drawn. We had no idea really what the cost would be of developing the land. And that, of course, turned out to be more than we ever expected it to be. But during this time, I was taking my children to school in Atlanta. I mean, they were going to school in Atlanta at the Waldorf school there. And one afternoon after school, we went to the zoo. We were going to the zoo. And I knew this little shortcut through this older neighborhood, run-down neighborhood in Atlanta. And my van broke down, and so these people came out to help me. Well, several people came out to help me. But this one woman that I started talking to while this person she knew went to get, you know, do something, see if he could fix my car, she told me a little bit about her situation. It was obvious she had a newer house, but it was in the style of the neighborhood. The neighborhood was Cabbagetown. It's an old mill village. And a lot of the houses were totally run down, but they had a newer house that was, you know, fit in, as I said. And I left that. She told me a little bit about the situation, but I didn't really understand. But she said, I just got such a feeling from her of great pride and empowerment that they had this house to live in. And so then she had to go somewhere, and she sent me to this office next door to use the phone. And I was calling my friends that I stayed with in Atlanta, and this woman in this office said, I know them. They were my neighbors in Grant Park. And so before I knew it, she was taking me. My car had to be towed, and she put us all in her car and took her home till I could be picked up. And I don't really believe that this was a total accident. And my car doesn't often break down. So we got in the car, and I said, what is it you do here? Because I've been in her office. And she said, well, this is a land trust. And the only land trusts that I was familiar with were the kinds that preserved land. So she started telling me about how they were taking some of these older buildings in the area and fixing them up for people to live in. They were also building some new ones. And what she said, the thing that was so different about it is that the land trust, the land had been donated to them, some of the original land, by the railroad and the company, I think, that had owned the original mill. And that the people, like the woman I met, owned her particular house, but she didn't own the land it was on. And so that really hit me because I thought, here we're doing this project, and if it's possible that someone comes that wants to live out here and can't afford the full price of a lot, it's possible they could be part of it by having a house on a lot owned by the land trust. So between the two things of not having a land trust in the area that wanted to take our land and wanting to make it affordable for anyone, Skipper and I, after a lot of soul searching and saying we don't want to start another land trust, did start the West Athens Land Trust, and got our 501c3. Do you want me to stop and we do it? And we felt like that. We felt like that it could be a tool for Kenney Ridge to use at some point, but we felt like it was bigger than Kenney Ridge. It wasn't, and it was separate from Kenney Ridge, because whether or not Kenney Ridge used it would be up to you all, the future residents. But as we started, and then the other things I think that ALT became involved in also came about while doing this project, seeing that the subdivision regulations in the county don't really support open space subdivisions, that there was no other land trust that would take conservation easements on open space right in downtown or in a neighborhood. And then all the different board members have brought their interest, and so ALT became very interested in just improving the quality of life in the county. We also saw that the ideals that we had of green building or alternative technologies were something that ALT could get involved with and support, and so we felt like that was another way that ALT could support Kenney Ridge by trying to get building permits or getting permission to do some things that weren't normally allowed. Do y'all want to interject something at this point?
Is the land trust, is that like a corporation? It's all the land and you have to file papers. You don't have any money. You have to file papers to be a land trust. So that's, anyone that holds land doesn't necessarily
There are a lot of different ways. A land trust can hold a piece of land in fee simple where they actually own the land, which is what community land. There are two kinds of land trusts. Oh, this is another thing I should say. That there are two kinds of land trusts. They're called the conservation land trust and the community land trust. And there's very little bridging of the two across the country, we found out. We feel like that's unfortunate because the more land that's preserved and conserved will drive up the cost of housing because you have less land available for housing. And so it needs to be, we feel like there needs to be a more holistic view. And a lot of people in the conservation land trust movement are trying to look at some of the social justice issues of what they're doing. So, to go back to your question, a land trust can hold a piece of land in fee simple if it's donated to them, and then they're responsible for it. Or the owner can maintain ownership and put a conservation easement on it. The conservation easement can have certain rights that the landowner can maintain, like he can put so many houses on it, he can use the land, he can farm it, he can have cattle on it, he can, or she can have cut the timber.
whatever is set up between the agreement.
Yeah, it's an agreement, but it is held, it is in perpetuity, so it is a very permanent kind of thing. So, yeah, but it's a land trust generally is a 501c3 organization with the IRS.
And it does have some money.
Oh, the Athens Land Trust? Yes, the Athens Land Trust does. You have to have, generally land trusts have a liability on their properties, things like that. I mean, liability insurance. and management fees. The Community Land Trust in Atlanta, the way it works is there's the person that owns the house on the land is given at least a 50-year, if not a 99-year lease. And then there's a lease fee, and that lease fee covers the taxes, it covers development costs, and other management fees.
Does the Athens Land Trust own the land?
The Athens Land Trust doesn't. I think that it is some land has been offered to it, an in-town piece of land in the Boulevard neighborhood that I think that the Land Trust, the board is planning to take.
And the community has voted to donate to back here?
And one other thing about the Athens Land Trust is that in the past few months we were approached by the Kenney River Land Trust about what our relationship will be with them, and even a possible merger is being discussed. Because their mission used to be river corridors mainly. They were also interested in keeping 316 somewhat scenic and free of development. Now theirs is much broader. They're open to open space in neighborhoods, farm preservation, historic preservation.
So who owns the 17 trust on the common area?
Right now, the 17 acres, it's being transferred from my name to the association, or however we decide.
Right, but then the board of the association wants to take this 17 acres and put it in permanent conservation trust with all. So it'll be it'll end up being a chunk of land that's under the Aegis wall. We'll still be working out the exact details, but that's the intent. Yeah.
A couple of other things that I should say about ALT. One is that part of ALT's mission is to try to educate the community. The speaker that came from Portland that spoke about urban sprawl and how Portland's dealing with that issue and green technologies, that kind of thing. We feel like there's a lot of room for that in this community.
Well, specifically on the mission of education, this is where the Turner Foundation money comes from.
Yeah. ALT received a $10,000 Turner grant this fall.
To do for what?
To do what? That's being decided by the board. But what was said in the request was basically general support for things like education, newsletter, having somebody going to commission meetings, planning commission and county commission meetings. The county is in the midst of doing their new comprehensive plan, and ALT has been asked to be part of that process, because we went to the county and said, we are here, we can hold conservation easements on property if you have some, and if it comes up for open space subdivisions. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So the grant is just for general support, because what we have learned from other people in the land trust movement is if you are relying totally on volunteers and don't have any paid staff, it's really hard to get something done. And I think that's true of everything. What I wanted to say is, going back to where Kenney Ridge was in all of this, not having someone that could come in and purchase the land and donate to the land trust, we of course went the route that you know that we went, which was to get a traditional loan and to finance the land by the sale of lots. And that was necessitated, or that's the only way that the option that we felt like we had. But as we saw the cost of the lots go up, it gave us more of a desire to have ALT happen and be in place, because we felt like we were getting further from our goal of making it possible for anyone who wanted to participate and to have the diversity that we wanted to have. So, does anybody have any other questions, or any of y'all, anybody want to interject anything?
I think another extension of that idea of working to try to make more affordable and alternative technologies is that ALT is also interested in working with the community association on the fate of the extra 2 lots. And we've had some preliminary discussions about whether or not, you know, the community wants to think in terms of working on this affordable housing issue within the community and taking the cost of that land out of the place of being able to put a house down and bring in some low-income people. And although the board was split 3 ways in the community, I don't think it's gotten very far in their thoughts on it. I thought Dave Lindsay had some very creative ideas about how we might approach it, and I hope that at the next general meeting, we can, the board can have worked out some ideas on how we might rethink this without having it an either-or situation.
Could we go back and talk about how Walt became Alt
Yes. Why
and
don't you talk
taking
about
on as a mission, looking at the quality of life of the whole county, and as Jenny just alluded to, including the 3 components, which we consider components of sustainable development. And while I use the term sustainable development, Jenny thinks that those 2 words are contradictory.
I'm trying to maintain an open mind.
The stated mission of ALT now is sustainable development in the county. And it has 3 components. One is preservation, one is affordable housing, and the third is alternative technologies, which make affordable housing sustainable.
If you build a house that's not energy efficient, then the people on the long term is a lot less affordable. Whereas an energy efficient house saves people a great deal of money. I think in the sustainable development movement that I've seen, they try, or at least some people try to address the different aspects of what that means. The environmental aspect and the human social aspect and the economic aspect. And if you're going to have a healthy community, you need to address all of those things. And so that's sort of what we're trying to do as a community at Kenney Ridge. And ALT changed from, when we first started out, we felt like we were geographically located in West Athens, so we chose West Athens Land Trust as our name. But in realizing that we needed to be involved in the whole community, we felt like it sounded like we were trying to exclude other parts of the county, particularly East Athens, where one of our board members has been really active in community gardens there and economic development there. And so we dropped the West, and now we're Athens Land Trust.
I think personally, I'm really delighted that ALT has kind of taken on the mission of impacting the whole county land use plan, which I think is really critical. I'm really glad to have that there. But I feel that the most intense, most time-consuming, most energy-consuming, and most productive aspect of the interaction between Kenney Ridge and ALT will be in the construction of affordable housing on this land here. Because I feel that, I personally feel that if we believe these values, then it's up to us to really sit down in our own local area, in our own lives. You know, we need to come forth with time, energy, money, and whatever it takes to make sure that there is the opportunity for an economically diverse group here. The people who will hopefully move into these houses will be our neighbors, and our, you know, in a sense, we'll have some interaction or hopefully membership in our community. So I think that's, in terms of what we actually do, the time we actually spend, the affordable housing on the site is going to be a real big issue.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Dan. Another component, however, within Kenney Ridge is we have discussed placing ALT's office in this building right here and getting a grant of some kind to renovate the building and do it with alternative technology.
I think Kenney Ridge Ridge has been a model. It's a model of lots of things for the Athens community, and I think that it has the ability to be a model of what you're talking about. And using the land trust, the community land trust model, which isn't used in the community yet, and showing that a diverse community can exist successfully.
I also agree that that the affordable housing would be a wonderful experiment, but kind of an answer to a question that Gary just posed. One thing I'm looking forward to working harder on this year, now that we have some funding, is to help ease the construction process of alternative renewables. Bill and I are going through this right now, and we're not allowed to build solar if it's our main heating source. We're not allowed, I mean, Dan and Kate can't get straw bale, insurance for it. There's, I think, a very large service that could help the community and others in the community to get over that first hurdle, so we have the all-powerful comps that the banks want to have before they say, oh yes, I can go out and I can find some other building like this to compare yours to. I know that it's in a nice neighborhood, and therefore I'm willing to risk this money to let you build that too. And we have huge barriers for doing that sort of stuff right now.
The word comps means what?
Comparable houses. Like, there aren't apparently any solar houses. There aren't any straw bale houses. There aren't any.
Well, there won't be any until they approve it.
Somebody's allowed to.
Somebody's got to go out and build them.
But right now you can do it. You have to pay for it. You can't get a loan.
Yeah. You have to be able to pay for it to do it.
It's a personal goal of Skipper's and mine to see if ALT can start a revolving loan fund for people that are doing this kind of thing to offset some of the initial costs, because they are higher. Initial building costs often are higher, not always. Another goal of ALT's is to try to set up a program like a Green Builders program, where you take at-risk youths and train them in green building, so it gives them jobs, and it makes the green technology be more accessible in the community.
Question, I have a couple. Could that concept encompass something like an older housing for older individuals who need assistance, or something like the Georgia Options Program? Are you familiar with the Georgia Options Program? Where there's a handicapped person, they own the house, and the Georgia Options provides the caregiver that would be there, but they're part of the community.
ALT hasn't looked at that, but it seems like it would fit right in with the issue. ALT has anyone on the voice input committees for planning? Yeah, well, I think that ALT has been asked to certify. I'm not sure if we decided to do that today. But yeah, it seems like that would be a good place.
We're going to wrap this discussion up in about 5 minutes.
Could I ask?
The chair or the president right now of ALT is the woman, Peggy Williams, who's the executive director of the Savage Town Land Trust. We felt like that she had the expertise of how a community land trust works, and no one else does, basically. And Jimmy,
Isn't she also associated with South Bay?
She's worked, on some projects with South Bay, I think. The people from Kenney Ridge are on the board. Bill and Jenny share a seat. Elsie Kate was one of the first board members, and Kate's retired. Ray, Skipper, Charlie, then the people that, did I name the Kenney Ridge?
You mentioned yourself?
I'm actually not on the board.
Jenny.
Jenny and Bill, yeah.
Oh.
Charlie. Help me.
And how many other board
The
members
people
are there?
that, the people that are not on the bridge are Garner Phillips, who's an attorney. Laura Hall, a landscape architect. She's the one that's been real active in East Athens Community Gardens. Stephanie Brown, who has been real active with Habitat for Humanity. And Jefferson's another person that's on there, Jefferson Holmes. The director of Habitat is on our board, but she hasn't been very active.
We talked about Stangle Road. Livonia is also.
I'm not sure that's official.
That's the active one.
Yeah.
And what is the, you mentioned about open spaces, subdivisions, what, I don't know anything about
Okay.
the
The county's zoning and subdivision regulations basically are set up so that when a developer takes a piece of land, it gets cut up, all of it, in a cookie cutter kind of, in a cookie cutter way. And the subdivision regulations don't really allow for houses to be a little bit more clustered and open space to be left. The various things that you might want to do that. Well, we've done it here to a degree, but we had to deal with the, there was a...
That's hard soil.
This is